Me encuentro en el centro de esta ciudad de Springfield, precisamente o exactamente a 2 cuadras de la casa original de Lincoln. Ahorita estoy entre la calle Sexta y Capitol Avenue, y esto parece ser el Capitolio, así que vamos a dar bueno, en cierta forma es un tour en la casa de Lincoln, que afortunadamente pues lo hacen gratuitamente. Tal parece que la familia de Lincoln puso esa condición de que se mostrara gratuitamente al público. Aquí estamos, aquí cerca está una iglesia. Vamos a llegar a la calle Séptima. Está una librería en la esquina, librería Lincoln. Es la librería pública de Springfield, librería Lincoln. En contraesquina está otra iglesia, y enseguida de esta iglesia un centro de información al visitante. Así que ahí es donde vamos a ir para que nos den un horario para poder visitar la casa de Lincoln. Así es como se ve el centro de Springfield, capital de Illinois. Ok, esta es una iglesia luterana. Enseguida vemos el centro de información al visitante. Aquí es donde entras para pedir la información y que te den tus tickets y tu horario para poder visitar la casa de Lincoln. Y como te dije, es completamente gratuito, sin ningún costo, pero tienes que conseguir tus tickets para poder entrar, porque en la situación que estamos es cierta cantidad de gente la que puede entrar a cierta hora, así que es de reservado.
Now, Lincoln and his family moved in a few years after that. He purchased the home here in 1844. Bought it for a grand total of $1,500. Now, when Lincoln moved in, it wouldn't have actually looked this extensive. That second story we see today was not there when he moved in. This was considered just a cottage, a single-story home with a little attic loft room above it. Now, as Lincoln found more success here in town as a lawyer and a politician, and as his family also continued to grow, 3 of his 4 sons are born here in this house. That family needs more space. So, 1856, that second story is added up on top, and the house is finished as we see it today. So, just something to keep in mind, the second floor of the home is about 17 years newer than the first floor. You will see differences up there. Higher ceilings on the second floor, bigger rooms, doors and door frames are a different style, reflecting Lincoln's growing status here in the community as he works up to national prominence. So, just something to keep in mind there. That's a little history of the house itself. But all that being said, I am pretty sure you guys got your tour tickets today to get that inside look and not to stand in the street, right? So we are gonna head inside. As soon as we get in the front door, we're just gonna hang a left and go into the parlor. That is a nice long room. We have a full group today, so we'll fill that room up to the back. I will come in behind you and we'll have our first stop in the house there in the parlor. So let's make sure we have masks on when we get inside the house, and in we go. Right this way, folks. I'm going to move to about the middle of the parlor here so I can see you all, and you can all have a good spot to see me. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you so much. I'm just going to park right here if that's okay. Everyone's in. No one left behind. Wonderful. Well, welcome, everyone. We are now standing inside Lincoln's home. And it is appropriate, actually, that we welcome you in this room first, because if you had all been guests of the Lincolns back in their day, they would have welcomed you in this room as well. This is known as the Formal Parlor. Basically, that just means that this is the fancy room, right? This is where you have all the nicest furniture and pretty display pieces, all the decorations, things that make a good impression on your guests. This is where the Lincolns hosted their parties, their formal events, social gatherings of all sizes, from the big parties to the small little intimate gatherings here, all filtered through the parlor, those important social functions. Now, because this is such an important social space, it was not really the room for any family time. So, those Lincoln boys, the sons, would not be found here in this room. In fact, if there was no party happening that particular day, these doors would have just been kept closed and locked. The boys kept out. Now that seems to have worked out pretty well for the Lincolns, because we do still have a lot of their furniture here, and it's in great condition. If you see, for example, all of the dark wood furniture pieces with the black upholstery on all the chairs and couches here, that is all black horsehair furniture, and with the stuff and the upholstery there. And with only one exception, all the horsehair furniture in the parlor is original to the Lincoln family. The only piece that is not theirs is this one rocking chair, here in the middle of the room. But the other rockers, the chairs, the couches, are all Lincoln originals. Pretty neat. On that subject of original stuff, there's a lot more in this room as well. The marble top table on the far wall there under the mirror belonged to the family. Then we have, moving to about the middle of the room on the back wall, this shelf unit, 5 levels tall, the tiered unit there with Lincoln's bust on top. That structure is an original piece. It's called a whatnot shelf. Yes, because you load it up with whatnots, trinkets and knickknacks, right? Pretty neat. And also in the far back corner on this side, if you can't see it yet, don't worry, you'll get a chance pretty soon, but in the far back corner is Lincoln's bookcase. Very impressive. It even still has a few of Lincoln's books in it as well. So, great stuff here in the room. But of course, the parlor is not just important because it is fancy and pretty. It's also important because we can trace back some historic events to this room. One of those events needs a little bit more context. You'll see where I'm standing here, there's a big split in the middle of the room with these folding doors. That's actually a leftover of the original layout of the house. When this was a single-story home, this was actually 2 different rooms. The parlor we see today was actually just the front half here in that time. And the back half of the parlor would have been the space for the Lincoln's master bedroom. Really the only bedroom when this was a 1-story home was here. And it is here, in the master bedroom, in the year 1850, the Lincolns experience a very important event that is unfortunately also a tragic one. They actually lose one of their sons here in the bedroom. Their second-born, Edward, or Eddie, passes away of tuberculosis here in the bedroom before he even turns 4 years old. His funeral is then actually held here in the front parlor. So that is an unfortunate, tragic event that really stays with the family for a long time. Very important here in the house. That's 1850. The next major event that happens here in the parlor, fast forward from the death of Eddie 10 years to 1860. In May of 1860, another major event happens here. That is when Lincoln was greeted in this room by a delegation of men from the Republican National Convention in Chicago that have traveled here to inform Lincoln he has been selected as the nominee for his party in that year's presidential election. This is where he was told, Mr. Lincoln, we want you to run for president. We want you on the ticket. Now, will you do it? Yes or no? And what do we think Lincoln said to that question? Yes. Well, he becomes president eventually, right? Must have said yes. I'm sorry, I was a trick question. I'm sorry that I tricked you, but he didn't actually say yes on the day he was asked, believe it or not. He actually didn't say no either. He said, let me think about it. He just needed more time. Remember that the Civil War was looming. Lincoln knew those tensions were there. He knew that he was a controversial figure, and his election might be that final straw that caused a war. However, it might have also been the only way to prevent slavery from expanding to new states and territories. So, quite a dilemma for Mr. Lincoln. What does he do? It takes him 3 days to think it over. You can pretty easily imagine Abe and his wife Mary sitting on one of these very couches talking it over, wondering if they want to do this for the family, for their country. Thankfully, after those 3 days, Lincoln does decide that it is a responsibility he wants, and he does accept then. So, after 3 days, he does say yes, and of course, the rest is history. Walk through. The table and chairs in there are originals. You'll also see Mary's glass cake stand on the far wall. That cake stand is an original piece. The cake that is on the stand, not original, or edible. I am sorry. But head through there. I will see you in that red room past the dining room, right that way. This room we find ourselves in, this is kind of the opposite of the parlor. Whereas the parlor room was off limits to the boys, just for the parties, well now this room is just for the family. This is called the sitting room. We would call this a living room or family room today. This is where the family gathers to relax, play games, they can enjoy each other's company, and they get some work done here as well. Particularly Mary, the lady of the house. You'd find her here most evenings. Over on this far right-hand side of the room, under that big mirror on the wall, you can see Mary's original sewing table. That's where she makes and mends the clothes for the family by hand. All of the boys' clothes are made personally by Mary there. So, a lot of work done at that table. Most evenings she is seated there working as hard as she could, at least trying to, while being distracted by the fact there would be often wrestling matches going on the floor here, right? Those Lincoln boys, they love to wrestle. And actually this time, when I say the Lincoln boys, I do not just mean those troublesome sons, I mean Abraham as well will wrestle his kids here on the floor. Lincoln is actually a great wrestler. He is the winner of over 300 wrestling matches. And in fact, Abe Lincoln is in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. That is true. That table to the left side of the room, you can see there they would play board games like chess, or if they wanted to be technologically advanced, they could use that wooden box contraption down there. Looks like it has a pair of binoculars on the front of it. That is an original piece. It is called a stereoscope, and it cost Mr. Lincoln about $25. That is close to $900 today. Wow. Very expensive piece. What could be so expensive? Well, it is their entertainment center. The basic way a stereoscope worked is, if you see on the table in front of it, there are cards scattered around. Each card has two nearly identical photos on it. You take a card, you put the cards into the box, look into the eyepieces, and the pictures will pop out at you in 3D. Now everybody act very impressed. Perfect. Ooh, I loved it. Great job. Thank you. So, that's the authentic 19th century reaction, right? There's no film yet, no TV or movies. Even photography is new. So imagine how neat it is to have a device that shows you photographic pictures in 3D. Very big deal. Very cool device. That is the original one still there on the table. So, Lincolns had pets. They have several. Their most well-known pet is a dog, a yellow Labrador mix by the name of Fido. Yes, Fido the dog. Runs around this room, playing with the family. He would also be chasing cats around this house. There's almost always a cat or two in this place, because Mr. Lincoln is in fact a cat person. He prefers cats. Lincoln will pick up stray cats off the street on his way home from work, carries them into the house, and lets them go on the floor. We actually have a letter from Mary in which she wrote that her husband's great hobby in the world was collecting cats. So there you go. I would love you all to remember two very important things about Mr. Lincoln if we learn nothing else today. He was a great wrestler and a great cat lover. Very important. Right. So, we are going to head upstairs next. A few quick words before we do. Just want to make sure as we head upstairs, please do hold that handrail on the stairs if you can, for two reasons. Safety is the big one. The steps can be a little steep. But also, hold that handrail because it's an original part of the house. The only original piece we want you to touch. It's as close as you will get to a handshake with Abe Lincoln. He held that same railing every day. So, pretty neat. Over in that room if you can, and then we'll leave you over here. Carpets original? Carpets are replicas. They are educated guesses, really, as to whether or not they were here. Because the carpeting in the house has not really survived. But this is a pattern from the time, so it does match closely with a pattern we see in a historic drawing on the first floor. So it's educated research guess. I got you. This room, where we are actually standing now, is the master bedroom suite. This is Abraham and Mary Lincoln's room. It is, in fact, 2 rooms. It extends behind me as well to a secondary room. We really call this one Abraham's room, and the back one we call Mary's room. That doesn't mean they slept separately. The Lincolns do mostly share this room up here. We call it Mary's room because that's where all of Mary's stuff is. Her clothes, her jewelry, personal items, even furniture from the Todd side of the family is back in that room. Also in Mary's room would have been the 2 youngest sons, Willie and Tad. They slept back there on what was called a trundle bed. That is basically a pull-out bed from under the main one, like a big drawer with a mattress in it. And if those boys were being rowdy or having a hard time getting to sleep, anything that required Mom's attention, she could get up from here and walk right back there to take care of the boys. Nice benefit to the 2 rooms right next to each other. They're no longer all cramped to that 1 bedroom downstairs. If anybody knows the house divided speech, a house divided against itself cannot stand. We think Lincoln wrote that speech on that very desk. So it is a very important piece of history. This is actually the only room in the house where we know exactly what the wallpaper was when the Lincolns were here. This is the only room where a scrap of the original wallpaper did survive. And we used that to find the entire pattern and recreate it as it looked back then. So this is a clear window to what it would have been for the Lincolns. This is probably Mary's idea, this pattern. It's a French pattern. And she knew French culture, she spoke French. This would have been right up her alley, meant to evoke that kind of classy European palace or manor style. Pretty neat.
There we go, there. That's all you need.
Yes, so in order to make sure you get a look at the rooms as we pass by, because we'll talk all about them once we're all gathered. Use it every day. Mary in particular actually loves this stove so much that she wanted to take it with them to the White House. Abraham did have to convince her the White House had a full kitchen already. They do not need the 600-pound stove. So they left it here. I don't really blame him for that, but I understand why Mary loved it too. It looks great, still basically looks new today. And of course it made great food. A lot of it the Lincolns kept themselves, because when they went to Washington, they did put a lot of it into storage. They did want to come back and live here after the presidency, even though that does not happen. So a lot of pieces were stored, waiting for them, including all that fancy furniture. So a lot of pieces they kept themselves, some they did sell, they did keep back down to the presidency and brought back here. So some sold, some down,
Oh, gosh.
So, it was never technically sold. It was always owned by the Lincolns. They rented it out to others while they were in Washington. And then after Lincoln's death, Robert held possession of it, the oldest son. He continued renting it out to other people for about 20 years. By 1887, he actually realized the current renters were not taking very good care of it. They were, in fact, charging people money to come.
Como se puede apreciar, todas estas casas, toda esta calle, las casas están desocupadas. Solamente que no se puede entrar. Toda esta calle está cerrada. No hay acceso para el tráfico.